Billionaire husband asked his son to choose a new stepmother from 6 models. He chose the janitor. The Cross mansion glittered, a monument to wealth carved from marble and ambition. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, dust that was currently the focus of Grace Holloway's quiet attention. On her knees, polishing the intricate patterns of the grand foyer floor, she was a dark island of concentration in a sea of gleaming white stone. Her worn, practical uniform contrasted sharply with the opulence surrounding her. Suddenly, the serene silence shattered like dropped crystal. "Ugh, watch it, janitor." The voice, sharp as shattered glass, belonged to Sabrina Lane. She stood framed in the arched doorway leading to the east wing, a vision of sculpted platinum blonde hair, icy blue eyes, and legs that seemed to go on forever. She was flanked by 5 other women, each breathtaking in their own way, tall, sculpted, radiating an aura of practiced perfection. Models, the contestants. Sabrina wrinkled her perfect nose, looking down at the spot Grace was polishing. "Honestly, do you have to be here? Some of us are trying to prepare for a life-changing opportunity, not inhale ammonia fumes." A titter of agreement rippled through the group. Grace didn't look up, her movement steady. "Just finishing this section, Mississippi Lane. I'll be out of your way shortly." "Shortly isn't good enough," Sabrina snapped, stepping pointedly onto the damp patch Grace had just cleaned, leaving a faint smudge from her designer stiletto. "Know your place. You're the help." The background noise. "We," she gestured grandly to her companions, "are the future of this household. Or, at least, one of us is." Her gaze swept over Grace with undisguised contempt. "Try not to be quite so visible when Mr. Cross is around. It's rather jarring." Another model, a fiery redhead named Chloe, chimed in with a sneer. "Yeah, seriously. It's bad enough having to compete with actual beauties without having that." Lurking in the corners, she gestured vaguely at Grace. Grace's cheeks burned, but she kept her head down, focusing on the rhythmic swipe of her cloth. The insults weren't new. For the past month, since these women arrived for Daniel Cross's bizarre stepmother selection contest, Grace had endured a constant barrage of microaggressions and outright cruelty. They treated her like furniture, or worse, an ugly stain on their pristine environment. Sabrina was the worst, her beauty a weapon she wielded with casual brutality. "Ugly. Know your place. Janitor." The words echoed daily. If you're enjoying the story so far, please don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming tales. The contest had been Daniel Cross's solution. 2 years ago, a tragic accident had stolen his vibrant wife, Eleanor, leaving him and their 8-year-old son, Julian, adrift in a grief-stricken ocean. Daniel, a self-made tech billionaire, had poured himself into work, a poor substitute for healing. A well-meaning friend, seeing Julian's quiet sadness, had suggested a radical idea. "Daniel, the boy needs a mother figure. Stability. Why not find someone new? Make it definitive." And Daniel, desperate and emotionally stunted, had agreed. But how to choose? He devised a test. 6 stunning models, selected for their beauty and poise, would live in a mansion for 1 month. They would interact with Julian. The boy, now 10, would choose his new mother. It was a contest as cold and calculated as a business merger. Grace had watched it unfold from the periphery. She'd been the Cross family's janitor and occasional housekeeper for 3 years. She'd seen Julian grow, had witnessed the devastating aftermath of Eleanor's death. While Daniel buried himself in boardrooms, Grace had become an unseen fixture, quietly maintaining the vast house. And, without fanfare or expectation, she'd started filling the small, aching gaps left in Julian's life. Now the month was up. Today was selection day. The air crackled with anticipation and cutthroat ambition. The models flitted around the mansion like exotic butterflies, practicing smiles, rehearsing pleasantries, shooting daggers at each other when they thought no one was looking. All except Grace. She retreated further into the shadows, polishing banisters in the grand hall where the selection would take place, her heart a heavy stone in her chest. She hoped Julian would pick anyone other than Sabrina. Anyone. The hall filled. Daniel Cross, tall and imposing with graying temples and eyes that usually held a distant coolness, sat on a plush armchair on a low dais. Julian, small and serious, fidgeted beside him, his eyes scanning the assembled women. The 6 models stood in a semicircle, radiating confidence and perfectly calibrated charm. Sabrina was front and center, her smile dazzling, her posture radiating absolute certainty. She'd spent the month subtly undermining the others and openly tormenting Grace, convinced her beauty was an unassailable advantage. Grace hovered near the service entrance, partially hidden by a potted fern, her polishing cloth forgotten in her clenched hand. She couldn't bear to watch, yet couldn't look away. Daniel cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent room. Julian, Daniel's voice was formal, lacking warmth. You've spent time with these 6 fine women. They've all endeavored to get to know you. The time has come. Choose who you wish to be your new mother. Sabrina's smile widened, almost predatory. She took an infinitesimal step forward. The other models held their breath. Julian looked small on the dais. He looked at the models, their expectant faces, their perfect hair and clothes. His gaze drifted past them, searching the edges of the room. It landed on Grace, half hidden by the fern. Their eyes met. In Julian's, Grace saw not the blank politeness he showed the models, but a flicker of something deep and familiar. He took a deep breath, his small chest puffing out. Then, in a voice that started small but grew clear and strong, cutting through the tense silence like a bell, he pointed decisively past the semicircle of stunned models. "Grace," he yelled. "I choose Grace." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Stunned disbelief froze the models' practiced smiles. Sabrina's radiant expression shattered, replaced by open-mouthed horror, her eyes wide with shock and burgeoning fury. She actually took a step back, as if physically struck. "What?" The word was a strangled shriek. Sabrina felt the world tilt. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with utter shock. Her? He chose her? The janitor? The one they called ugly? Impossible. Daniel Cross looked utterly bewildered, his gaze snapping from his son to the spot Julian was pointing. He saw Grace, frozen in her work uniform, looking like she wanted the polished marble floor to swallow her whole. "Julian," Daniel began, his voice tight with confusion, "Grace isn't one of the contestants. She works here." Loving this twist of this belittled black woman rising into power? Then please subscribe now, so you never miss a story with a heart like this. "But I want her," Julian insisted, his voice trembling slightly but unwavering. He turned to his father, his small face earnest. "Daddy, you weren't here. You didn't see." His eyes took on a distant look, the present moment dissolving as memories surged forward. It was late. Rain lashed against the windows of the mansion's kitchen. Daniel was away in Tokyo, closing another multi-million-dollar deal. Julian, just turned 9, sat hunched at the granite island, pushing cold pasta around his plate. The housekeeper had left hours ago. The vast emptiness of the house pressed in on him, making the silence roar. He missed Mom. A tear escaped, tracing a path down his cheek and plopping onto the counter. Then soft footsteps approached. Grace, finishing her evening rounds, paused in the doorway. She saw the small, lonely figure, the untouched food. Without a word, she walked in, tying her faded apron over her uniform. "Cold pasta ain't no good for a growing boy, Mr. Julian," she said softly, her voice warm like honey. "What you fancy? Grilled cheese? Maybe some hot chocolate?" Julian looked up, surprised. Can I have pancakes?" he whispered. Grace smiled, a genuine, warm smile that crinkled the corners of her dark eyes. "Pancakes it is." Soon, the kitchen filled with the comforting smells of frying batter and melting butter. She didn't make fancy silver-dollar pancakes. She made one big, fluffy one, just the way Julian liked it, with a smiley face drawn in chocolate chips. He ate it all, the warmth spreading through him, pushing back the cold loneliness. Another night. Julian was restless, tossing in his giant bed. Shadows seemed to dance menacingly in the corners of his opulent bedroom. He couldn't sleep. He missed Mom's lullabies. He crept out into the dimly lit hallway, drawn by a soft sound. Peeking into the library, he saw Grace, dusting shelves under a pool of lamplight. She was humming, a low, sweet melody that seemed to weave through the silence. "Honey Grace," Julian whispered. She jumped, then smiled when she saw him. "Can't sleep, a little man?" He shook his head, suddenly feeling shy. The shadows. They looked like monsters. Grace put down her duster. She settled into the big armchair by the lamp and patted her lap. "Come here. Monsters don't stand a chance against a good story." Hesitantly, Julian climbed up. She wrapped an arm around him, her embrace solid and safe. She began to read from a worn book of fairy tales, her voice soft and rhythmic. She didn't rush. She did the voices, a booming giant, a squeaky mouse. Julian nestled against her, the steady beat of her heart beneath his ear, the cadence of her voice lulling him. He drifted off. Later, half asleep, he felt her gently shift him, pulling the soft duvet up snugly under his chin, tucking it around his shoulders with careful hands before quietly leaving. On another Saturday, when sunlight streamed into the cavernous playroom, Julian was trying to build an elaborate spaceship from Lego, but frustration mounted as pieces refused to fit. Sabrina, passing by on her way to the pool, had wrinkled her nose. Building toys? How juvenile. The other models rarely engaged unless Daniel was present, their interactions stiff and performative. Grace, however, was cleaning the windows. She saw Julian's slumped shoulders. Finishing her pain, she walked over. "That looks mighty complicated, Captain. Need a first officer?" Julian looked up, surprised. "You want to play?" "Depends," Grace grinned. "You any good at hide and seek?" For the next hour, the grand playroom echoed with Julian's genuine laughter and Grace's playful shouts of ready or not. They hid behind curtains, under tables, Grace only just fitting and in giant closets. Grace played with abandon, her earlier reserve melting away in the face of Julian's joy. She wasn't a janitor then. She was a co-conspirator, a fellow adventurer. Sabrina, returning from the pool, had paused at the doorway, her expression one of utter disdain. "How common," she muttered before flouncing away. Julian hadn't cared. He was having fun. The most vivid memory struck. Julian had been racing his bike down the mansion's long, paved driveway. He took the corner too fast, skidded on loose gravel, and crashed. Pain exploded in his knee. He looked down to see a deep gash, blood welling thick and red, staining his khaki shorts. Panic seized him. He cried out. Before he could even take another breath, Grace was there. She must have seen it from a window. She dropped her gardening gloves and ran, kneeling beside him, her face etched with concern, not annoyance. "Oh, sweetheart, you took a tumble. Let me see." Her voice was calm, steadying his panic. She examined the cut with gentle fingers. "Deep, but we can fix this. Hold tight." She scooped him up effortlessly, a feat that surprised him, and carried him straight to the large, well-stocked first aid room off the kitchen, a room Daniel insisted on but rarely thought about. Grace worked quickly and efficiently. She cleaned the wound with antiseptic wipes. Julian winced, but didn't cry out, applied gentle pressure with gauze to stop the bleeding, and expertly applied sterile bandages. "There now," she said softly, smoothing the tape down. "Good as new, Captain. Just need to keep it clean." She even found him a clean pair of shorts from his room. Daniel, informed via a brief, efficient call from Grace later, had simply said, "Good. Handle it." He hadn't come home. Back in the grand hall, the memories cascaded through Julian's mind, each one a testament to Grace's quiet, constant presence. Tears welled in his eyes, but they were tears of conviction. He looked directly at his father, then swept his gaze over the stunned, furious models, finally resting it on Grace, who looked utterly overwhelmed. "She made me pancakes when I was sad, and you weren't home," Julian said, his voice gaining strength with each word. "She sang to me when I was scared of the dark. She read stories until I fell asleep and tucked me in. She played hide and seek with me when no one else would. She fixed my knee when I fell and made it stop hurting. He took a shuddering breath, his small finger still pointing at Grace. She's been doing stuff like that for 2 years, Daddy. Ever since Mom left. She's nice. She's kind. She makes me feel safe. I don't care if she's black. His voice rose defiantly, echoing Sabrina's earlier insults. I don't care if you all think she's ugly. She's not. She's beautiful here. He thumped his small fist against his chest. She's beautiful inside, and she makes me not miss Mom so much all the time. The silence that followed Julian's declaration was profound. The grandeur of the hall seemed to shrink, dwarfed by the raw honesty of a child's heart. Grace stood transfixed, tears now streaming freely down her face, tracing paths through the faint smudges of cleaning residue on her cheeks. She pressed her hands over her mouth, her shoulders shaking silently. He saw, she thought, a wave of incredulous warmth washing over the shock. He really saw me. Daniel Cross stared at his son. The carefully constructed walls around his own grief, the emotional distance he'd maintained since Eleanor's death, seemed to crack and crumble under the weight of Julian's words. The flashbacks weren't just Julian's. Daniel saw them too, refracted through his son's memory. He saw the lonely boy at the counter, the frightened child in the library, the joyful adventurer playing hide-and-seek, the injured boy being tended with gentle hands. He saw Grace Holloway, not just the efficient janitor in the background, but the quiet, consistent source of comfort and care for his son. Care he had been too lost in his own pain and ambition to provide. And then his gaze shifted to the models. He saw Sabrina's face, now contorted with rage and humiliation, her earlier beauty twisted into something ugly. He remembered the reports from the discreet household staff he'd largely ignored, whispers of snide remarks, deliberate messes left for Grace, the open contempt. He saw Chloe's sneer, the other's haughty indifference. He remembered Sabrina's shrill command, "Know your place, janitor," echoing in the grand space where Julian's truth now resonated. A storm of emotions brewed within Daniel. Profound shame at his own blindness and neglect, a fierce, protective love for his son, and a cold, towering rage directed at the women who had tormented the very person who had anchored his child. Feeling the emotion? Stories like this are just a subscribe away. Sabrina found her voice first, a venomous shriek. "This is ridiculous. A janitor? That servant." She spat the word like poison. "Daniel, you can't possibly allow this. It's an insult." The boy is confused. "Look at her." She gestured wildly at Grace, who flinched but held her ground, Julian's word to shield. "Enough." Daniel's voice, usually controlled, boomed through the hall with an authority that made even Sabrina flinch. He stood up, his frame seeming to expand, his gray eyes blazing with an intensity no one present had ever witnessed. All traces of detached billionaire were gone, replaced by a father incandescent with fury and newfound clarity. He stepped down from the dais, his gaze sweeping over the 6 models, lingering on Sabrina with undisguised contempt. "My son," he said, each word clipped and icy, "has spoken, with more wisdom and heart than any of you possess." He pointed towards the grand entrance, his hand steady. "You heard him. He chose Grace, which means your presence here is no longer required. Any of you." Chloe gasped. Another model stammered, "But Mr. Cross, the contest, the agreement." "The contest," Daniel snarled, "is over. Julian has made his choice clear. And it wasn't any of you. It was the woman you spent a month belittling and abusing." He took a step closer to Sabrina, who shrank back. "Especially you, Sabrina. Your beauty is a shallow mask. Underneath, you're cruel and small. Get out of my house. Now." He turned his furious gaze on the others. "All of you, pack your things. You have 20 minutes. Security will ensure you leave the premises." He gestured sharply to the head of security, who had materialized near the door, his expression impassive but alert. Stunned silence, then a flurry of outraged protests and indignant sobs erupted. But Daniel stood immovable, a pillar of righteous anger. "Sabrina," Her face, purple with rage and humiliation, seemed to vibrate. She shot Grace a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You think you've won, you little cockroach?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "This isn't over." But a firm hand from a security guard on her elbow silenced her. "This way, Mississippi Lane." The walkout was indeed a walk of shame. The models, their designer luggage hastily grabbed, their perfect facades crumbling into tear-streaked anger or stunned disbelief, were escorted through the grand foyer they had once hoped to rule. Past the spot where Sabrina had deliberately stepped on Grace's clean floor. Past the silent, watching staff. Past Grace, who stood rooted to the spot, still trembling. Sabrina couldn't resist one last glare, but Grace met it not with fear, but with a quiet, stunned dignity. The massive front doors closed behind the last model with a resonant thud, sealing their exit. The sudden quiet in the hall was deafening. Daniel stood for a moment, breathing heavily, the adrenaline of his outburst still coursing through him. Then he turned. He looked at Julian, who was watching him with wide, hopeful eyes. Then his gaze settled on Grace. She looked terrified, like a rabbit caught in headlights, her hands twisting the damp cleaning cloth. "Mr. Cross, I never. Julian, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cause." She stammered, tears still flowing. Daniel crossed the space between them in a few strides. He stopped before her, looking down at this woman who had cared for his son when he could not. He saw the kindness in her dark eyes, the strength in her posture despite her fear, the gentle curve of her lips that had sung lullabies. He saw the beauty his son saw. "Grace," he said, his voice rough with emotion, but infinitely softer than it had been moments before. He reached out, slowly, and gently took the dirty cleaning cloth from her clenched fingers. He dropped it to the polished floor. "Don't apologize. Please." He took a deep breath. "Thank you." Grace blinked, confused. "Thank you for everything," Daniel said, his voice thick. "For the pancakes. For the stories. For fixing his knee. For being there." He looked at Julian, who had scampered down from the dais and now stood beside Grace, slipping his small hand into hers. "For seeing him when I couldn't." He looked back at Grace, a tentative, unfamiliar warmth softening his features. Julian chose his mother, and he chose beautifully. He paused, searching her eyes. "The question is, Grace Holloway, would you accept this? Us?" Grace looked from Daniel's earnest, remorseful face to Julian's hopeful, upturned one, his small hand warm in hers. She thought of the insults, the humiliation, the loneliness of her position. Then she thought of the pancake smiley faces, the quiet lullabies, the shared laughter during hide-and-seek, the trust in Julian's eyes. She thought of the immense, terrifying, beautiful possibility unfolding before her. A slow, tremulous smile spread across her face, brighter than any chandelier in the grand hall. She squeezed Julian's hand. She looked back at Daniel, her voice clear and steady despite the tears. "Yes," she whispered. Then, stronger yes. Julian let out a whoop of pure joy, throwing his arms around Grace's waist. Daniel, a hesitant smile finally reaching his own eyes, placed a hand gently on his son's shoulder. In that moment, amidst the gleaming marble and the lingering scent of polish, a new family began to take root, chosen not by contests or beauty, but by the quiet, enduring power of a kind heart. The janitor's crown, woven from love and resilience, fit perfectly. If this story touched your heart, imagine what others await. Subscribe now for more unforgettable journeys. We are the Black Nation, a family of love.